Hey, welcome to Action Dine Creative Technologies. My name is Matt, and we're going to go over Procreate Dreams, a brand new animation app from the makers of, you guessed it, Procreate. The app only works on the iPad, and that's probably why it works so well. If you read a little bit about the developers, they focus solely on developing for the iPad, so their resources aren't stretched across trying to learn different platforms, and they don't have to make sacrifices to how a user interface works or any proprietary stuff that they make for it just so that it will work on another platform. They have absolutely no plans, from what I read, to make it work on a Mac, Windows, Android. It is strictly 100% iPad OS. So let's dive right in. I'm going to take a look at my iPad here. And okay, so I'm in Procreate Dreams here, and they give you 3 sample dream files that you can open. And I do recommend opening those up and kind of taking a look. There's definitely some things that you can learn about it. So last night, first thing I did, and this was super easy to do. I imported a video of my dog, added another track, and was just doing some simple tracing animation over them, just to kind of get a feel for doing something simple and trying not to get too complicated. You know, real basic. That's Moose. Say hi, Moose. He loves you. So let's take a look at where we're gonna start. Okay, so let's talk about gestures. So here's what I've written down in my notes. So double tap anywhere on the timeline to zoom in closer to that area. Oh, one finger. I was using 2. There we go. 3 fingers sliding side by side. You can zoom in, zoom out. 3 fingers up and down. And the nice thing is that once you start moving up, down, left, or right, it doesn't combine the 2. So if I'm doing vertically, it's only going to go vertical. If I lift and then try that again, it's only going to zoom that way. I'm actually used to doing the pinch to zoom thing. And so I'm finding myself kind of struggling to get used to the using that. And it's not that the 2-finger method doesn't work, but if I want to zoom in on time, I can't really do that so easily with the pinch to zoom because it's doing everything. So that's why the 3-finger method is really good, because you can zoom in on time without changing your track height here. So I thought that was pretty important. The other thing to note here is when I'm on the stage, if I tap on the stage, you can see I've got my artwork here. I know it's real high-end artwork here. I could sell this for billions of dollars. Let's say I want to use snapping. So again, if I'll tap and I get the bounding box, once that bounding box is there, I can use my finger, and I don't need to put my finger on the artwork itself. I can actually put it over to the side. I know you can't see my finger, but that's okay. And using one more finger, you turn snapping on. You see that little message up there. So it'll snap it to center lines, the edges of the stage. And this is also how you can do rotations. What I'm going to do here, I'm going to hit the plus button. I'm going to add another track. I'm going to go into drawing mode. And let's just make some basic shape here. Squiggle. There we go. Oh, poor Moose. Look at that dog. Look at that face. So let's say we want to try snapping on this one. I need to edit drawing mode for this. And I think that's going to be one of those things that a lot of people who are used to using Procreate, because you're pretty much kind of always in drawing mode in Procreate, but you're going to be jumping in and out of drawing mode to do other things. But let's say I want to rotate this with snapping. Let's see what happens with if I start scaling it with snapping. You can see it's snapping to the edge of the stage there. And that's one thing, not to get too sidetracked here, but they don't call it a canvas anymore. They call it a stage. There's stage and then there's off stage. The off stage area is technically part of your canvas, but the nice thing is let's say you've got artwork that you plan to bring in and animate into the scene or out of the scene. You can have it just sitting off to the side on the off stage area. That I think is pretty cool. Back to what we were doing here. So I can move this artwork around, basic transform, move, scale. But what about rotate? You have to go up to this little thing here. No. You tap on one of the anchor points, and if you notice it, you get the bounding box that comes up, and if you don't tap hands off, it'll fade away. If I tap on an anchor point, then I get that little quarter circle and I can rotate. Okay, and it's rotating around the anchor point, which by default is going to be in the center of whatever content that you have. But let's say we want to change that. So I can edit the anchor, and I don't have to put my finger on the anchor. You can put your finger anywhere up in the stage or off stage area to get it. So maybe I just want it right at the tip and just rotate it around that. And you have to click done in the upper corner. And now that I've done that, when I go to rotate, you see it's going to pivot around that. And it's also going to scale around that as well. Okay, so that's pretty good to know, particularly if you're going to be animating it, right? You've also got some controls up there with that 3 little dots for flipping horizontally and vertically. Okay, so now that I know how to move and rotate an image, what if I wanted to animate that? So let's take a look at keyframing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my playhead, it's the little guy I'm moving around down at the bottom there. And if I tap on it, I get an option to move. So let's hit that, and then we're going to start off with move and scale. So right here, maybe I want to start with, let's have this like spin in. Give that a try. So we've already moved our anchor point. I'm going to tap there. Rotate. Maybe we'll have it start there, and let's make this a little more than just a few frames. That's going to be too quick. Let's see. We'll do like 2.5 seconds. And so at this point in time, I want it to be over here. Oh. That's right. So check this out. This is happening to me, and it's not Procreate, it's me. When you put the playhead there, you're going to still want to tap it again, and then you see it now. You've got that like lighter gray like range between these 2 points. Tap it once more to get my controls back up, and now I can put it over here. And rotate it and scale. And if you grab the edges of that bounding box, that's how you can kind of stretch it. Grabbing the corners will scale it uniformly. And so we'll just put it up there. So now, So you can see it goes from off stage, across the stage. Pretty cool. If I hit play, it's going to loop across this, just the area that I've got here. Now, an important thing, if you want to turn that off, if you don't like how it loops between showing what's visible, this part of the timeline that's on the screen, you actually can't change that setting in Procreate itself. So you actually have to go into the settings app, the Apple settings app, and go to the Procreate section. There are a few more settings there. So if you don't like that for whatever reason and you want to disable it, that is where you would look for that. I'm going to show you one other gesture. If you do a 4-finger tap on the screen, you get a full screen preview. Look at that moose. Oh my. What a moose. So let's say we want to delete a keyframe. I'm going to add a keyframe that I don't want. So let's see if I'm doing this right. No, because it's not highlighted. Tap on it again. There we go. It's highlighted. So if I move it down here, now it's doing that. But maybe I didn't want that one there. Maybe that was a mistake. You just tap and hold on that keyframe. You can delete the keyframe. So another thing you'll see when you're doing that, and this is kind of cool, you can actually type in, if you want to put in some specific adjustments there, you can type that in. I do love that. If you tap and hold on the keyframe, on this I'm seeing expand, move, and scale. What this is showing is that you've actually got keyframe tracks for each parameter, location, scale, and rotation. You could actually tap and hold on one of those and completely delete scale. So I could remove all of the scale animation from that if I want to. Heck, why not? Let's do that. You can set easing. So what that is kind of changing the speed at which it will transition from keyframe to keyframe. I think any animator is familiar with this. Now you've got set easing and you've got set all easing. I'm actually just going to do set all. So just to show you, if we do linear, speed is constant, right? Whereas if we set all easings to ease in and ease out, it'll start slow, go fast, and then slow down again. All right. So one example that they gave on how to use this would be setting the easing for, let's say, a ball bouncing. You'd let go. It would start off slow, then speed up to a constant rate. So you'd want ease in for that. After it hits and bounces back up, that's going to be a constant rate, but it's going to slow down the higher up it goes. So that's where you would want an ease out. Just as an example of how you would set that sort of thing up with keyframes. So you can add keyframes to movement, rotation, like we just saw. I'm going to collapse those keyframes. And I'm actually going to delete all of those keyframes together. I'm going to put this thing right here, whatever that is, and let's show what else. You can also add a keyframe for a filter. So let's try, let's say blur. So let's say I want it to start out normal. And over here, tap. Tap in. There we go. I accidentally tapped on my track, on the content track, but you want to tap on the keyframe tab. So over here, I want it to get blurry. Now the cool thing is these are non-destructive. This isn't actually blurring my artwork at all, and you can go back and change it at any point. But you can see that allows you to change any of these filters as well. That is just so freaking awesome. I absolutely love that. Oops. Accidentally added another one. Just tap and hold on a keyframe to set the easing or delete it. I'm going to delete the whole track. You can say delete blur amount, and that whole track is gone. There we go. All right, one other thing I caught in the manual that I wanted to go over was when you are doing a filter, no, not a filter. Oh yeah, and check this out. So there's no back button on this little menu. All you got to do is grab it at the top and flip it down, and it brings you back to where you were. If we go into move and then we go into warp, now they give you these controls. We got horizontal controls and vertical controls. If you change this, let's bump these up to 6 on each one. You can't go back and change this later. You'll have to reset that whole track. So dial this into the numbers you need right away, because you're going to be stuck with those. That's what the manual says. So let's follow that. But this is a lot of fun because they give a few examples of, maybe making birds' wings flap or making someone's eyes get real big, which could be a real time saver. Again, tap on that little thing. And I'm actually using my finger here. You can use the pencil, your finger, and just kind of grab the spot that you want to move around. Tap again, and I can make another one. You can do some weird stuff with this. That would be pretty cool with lettering. I think some people are going to have a lot of fun doing that kind of stuff with text. It just blows my mind. All right, so that's one thing I wanted to make sure we went over. Okay, so the next up is performance, which is actually, I keep calling it the record button because it, play and record is kind of what that looks like. So if we hit the performance button, if you look in the upper left-hand corner, it says ready. It's not actually recording until you actually are touching the screen. And again, it can be anywhere on stage, off stage. You don't have to put your finger directly on the artwork, which I wouldn't recommend because then you can't really see exactly what you're doing. So as soon as you start moving it around, it's recording. As soon as you lift off, it pauses so you can keep adding more. And one thing that they mention, I'm actually going to stop that. Let's bring this in just a little bit. I just want to show you one other thing that they mention in the manual. So when you are doing performance mode, and I want to have you watch what happens on this track of this artwork as I move it. If it can, it will extend the artwork to the duration, to meet the duration of your performance of you moving it around. And again, that works with that performance will record anything that you can keyframe. So movement, rotation, scale, even the warp, even any of the filters. If you want to do some crazy quick slider changes of the hue of your artwork to make it some like rapid changing rainbow, you can do all of that. You can do it. If you can do it with keyframing, you can do it with performance. But let's show you exactly what that looks like because you've got the little sliders up. So, all right. So I'm going to add a filter and let's do noise. And I'm still performance record armed and ready. Do I want to use the pencil or my finger? It doesn't matter. So I'm just sliding that slider up back and forth, and that's all I did. So overall, I'm going to hit the red stop button. I think they have another name for it, but that's okay. That's what I'm calling it. So we could have done that with keyframing, right? But we definitely saved some time by doing that. Might be subtle, might be hard for you to see the noise that I've added there. So let's do one other thing. All right, now we're set up to do some fun hue shifts. Just sliding it back and forth as it plays. As soon as I lift up, it pauses. It doesn't stop, it pauses. So I could even then do a quick saturation drop at the very end. Ooh. So playing it back. So now we've got our changing noise and color. And that was done pretty quick. That's what I like. It's fast. All right. So the last thing about performance that I want to show you, and this is one of those things that they mention in the manual. So let's say I do have that color shift, right? So let's say it's armed and ready, and I go in and start recording, but I'm going a little bit slower. What's actually happened there is it overrides your existing keyframes that it puts there. The performance mode does record those keyframes that you could manually edit if you want. But just keep in mind, if you've already got some keyframes there that you've put in, doing a performance mode of the same thing will override that. And you'll lose any keyframing that you've already done. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so leaving performance mode, I'm going to tap on the drawing mode button. And when we're in drawing mode, and only when we're in drawing mode, do you get this little thing in the middle where you can pull the timeline down. I've already spent amount of time wondering. Oh, there we go. Can't do that on a keyframe track. If you pull the timeline down, you're then left with this Flipbook, which you can, as you can see, can kind of manually shift through stuff, either by tapping on the next or previous frames. Tapping and holding on the center one, you get the Flipbook menu where you can cut, copy, duplicate, and paste these frames as well as clear them. And on this particular track, I've only got one drawing. I'm going to trim it, which, by the way, you can do just by holding your finger on the edge of it there and dragging. Pretty simple. I'm going to show you something here, and this was something that was kind of happening when I was working on Moose here. If I go into drawing mode right now on this track, and yeah, let's make a blue one. Oh, as you can see, my cursor showing the keyframe. I want to make sure that I'm on the actual artwork here. So if I start drawing on the screen here, you will notice that the drawing extends in time all the way to the end. So if you're trying to do frame by frame and you're getting tired of dragging each one of these down to be one frame, what you really want to do is pull the timeline down. You want to be in Flipbook. When you've got Flipbook open and you tap on the center image and then tap new frame, let me draw on this one real quick. if we close Flipbook and I use 3 fingers sliding horizontally to zoom in on time there, you can see it's made one more frame after it, but it's only made it 1 frame in duration. Additionally, on top of that, if I'm looking at this drawing and I go into the Flipbook, and on this particular frame, I'm going to add another one. We'll change color here just so this is really obvious. Okay. Poor Moose. Everyone's drawing on him. As you can see, what it did is it actually cut the drawing before it to make sure this one fit in. And I can just extend that one out if I want to. And here's another thing to note. When you're extending these frames out, it's going to hit the next content that it sees and stop. And you can't drag it out any further unless you're holding down another finger. And as the top, you can see it says free trim. In the manual, they refer to this as push and pull. But just keep in mind, this will push all the other content coming after it. It'll keep pushing it down the line, and things might not match up. So just be careful when using that, is my thought. But I like being able to do both. That's pretty cool. And you can trim from either way. And that's kind of crazy because it's actually pushing that frame to be before 0 seconds, so that wouldn't even show up. So just keep in mind that you could end up doing that. One more thing. So if you're used to an animation using onion skinning to see the previous frame or frames as well as the next upcoming frames, you might be wondering, where is that? So if you tap on the time code in the lower corner, believe it or not, that's a button. That's where you get the option to show onion skin. You can change the settings of it by tapping on edit onion skin. So you can change the color of the backwards and forwards, as well as how many frames ahead and previous it sees, and opacity. And again, I love this. There's no back button. You just drag that down. Oh, that's so fun. That's kind of neat being able to see how many menus deep you are as they stack up. The other thing to note here is in Procreate, in each drawing, you would have a bottom layer called your background layer. If you wanted to change the color, you tap on it. That's where you get at it from here as well, is under the time code. And you can do this, I believe you can do this when you're not in drawing mode as well. But that's even how I could make a transparent background. We can't see that because my Moose video is back there as well, but that's okay. So this is, you can see that's where you would change your background color, or make it transparent. So that's where that button is sort of cleverly hidden. So speaking of layers, when we are in drawing mode, everything looks just how you would expect from Procreate. You've got your brushes. Some things are different though. If I tap on a brush, I cannot edit that brush. So the Brush Studio is only part of Procreate, and it's not part of Procreate Dreams. Maybe they'll add that at some point. I don't know. Not really a deal breaker, but you can import your brushes from Procreate into Procreate Dreams, which is absolutely spectacular. So another thing that I had learned this morning, now normally if you switch to another brush, and let's say my erase brush was this big, huge thing, but I like the brush that I was just using for the size or the shape or whatever. If you tap and hold on the eraser, you can see erase with current brush. And it also works for either way, the smudge, brush, eraser. So now I'm erasing with the brush I was just using. This may very well have been part of Procreate, but it's one of those little hidden things I didn't know about. Just read about it this morning. Thought I'd share that little tip with you. Now, the other thing that is different is layers. So each drawing, each frame, or however long the drawing is, you do have layer options for that. So we can create a new layer. Let me change the color here. Draw on that poor moose. He's graffiti dog today. If you are used to changing the layer order in Procreate by tapping your finger and holding and dragging it up and down, you cannot do that anymore. You cannot change the layer order. They might change that. They might fix that. But there's a pretty good reason for this. Now, my thoughts on this, if you had tons of drawings across a track, you'd be doing layer management on each drawing. And I think that would just take a crazy amount of time to do. So while you do have these layers there, you can't change the order. Instead, what they want you to think is having a separate track of drawings and treat each track like a layer instead. So just, think a little bit differently on how you're going to approach doing what you're doing. The other thing you'll notice is you do have the blend modes with the layers, which is awesome. But if you tap on it, you used to get in Procreate, you had a much larger choice of options. So let's say, for instance, I use Alpha Lock all the time in Procreate. It's like one of my favorites. That and being able to reference. That's all gone. You don't really have those tools to work with. Whether they're going to add those at some point or not, I don't know. It's not a deal breaker. There are some other ways to approach those problems, but really you just have the option to rename and clear that layer. Now, let's say your idea is that you wanted to keep these separate, but you wanted, for drawing, erasing, but you want to be able to manipulate them as a group, and that's really how they want you to think, because you can group content and layer and tracks so you can make add movements to the several drawings all at once. So that's kind of, again, where you lead back to, you really got to think of, instead of using layers, you may just want to get into the habit of creating tracks. And if you're used to, let's say, for instance, things like Alpha Lock, I'm going to show you something real quick here. So if we tap and hold on that artwork here. Oh, look at that. There's actually a button, convert layers to tracks. I just noticed that. Let's take a little quick look here. So under track options, hide all, show all, delete, duplicate track. You can set a mask for this, and I believe you would want to group it first, otherwise, because I think it's only for this one particular drawing. But you can use a clipping mask and a layer mask. So a good example of how this was done, if you tap on this little next to Dream one on the left side, which brings you to what they call the theater. If you open up the example into the future, and you can actually see how they've got, as I skim through here, this is so cool to see, like what they've made with this iPad app here. This is pretty darn good. But you can see how they've grouped it. You can open that up, and I'm going to, let's see, we'll look at scene one. And as you can see, they've got a clipping mask. So this whole group, tap and hold, do the mask. So they use the clipping mask on that to keep these blue lines that are on their legs. Those were actually on a separate track. They drew the legs. You can see those down below. Right? And then these groups above them are the frames of the blue, and they used a clipping mask to make sure that that blue was only showing where the legs were. So that can give you an idea of how you can use the tracks and groups instead of utilizing it in a layer for that particular artwork. So, and I think that's entirely just going to change your workflow, but it's just kind of a different way of approaching it, really. You just gotta think different. Okay, so I've got my original moose thing opened up here, and I've actually just imported something, and I want to show you how easy this is. If I actually just tap and grab this moose picture, I can just drag it up, and now it's on its own track. So the last thing I'm gonna go over, I haven't really played with this a ton because so far I've only got little bits of stuff, but it's this one right here, this timeline edit. And this is such a unique way of doing things, but you actually use the Apple Pencil to select stuff that you want to group or do things with. So I can group all of that into one piece. So after it's grouped, I could then do something like changing the blend mode, or how do we do the masking? I'm gonna have to figure that one out, but you get the idea. Oh, that's why. There's certain things you cannot access when you are in timeline edit. Particularly, you can't even ungroup. That's one of the things I had read. Was it? No, you can ungroup. You get the idea. The menu changes depending on if you have it selected anyway. You can see you're very limited. So you'd want to turn that off. That's what it is. Basically, you can't have it selected and then ungroup it. But you can actually group, select a bunch of stuff. And this is going to take some playing with. This is just so wild. Not to mention, it looks like, some of those light painting brushes. It just looks really slick. So, I mean, I could technically group these if I want to. I don't know why you would want to do that, but there's a scenario for anything, I guess. But as you can see, I can't ungroup without taking it out of that mode. But you can just, they call it timeline edit, but yeah, it's just kind of like a selection mode, and it'll put a red box around everything you've circled, and you can keep adding to it. I think that's pretty slick. That is awesome. All right, so a little thing about tracks that I'm just going to refer to my notes here. So anything you add to Procreate Dreams will live on a track. So again, think of it like layers and how you have them arranged. So just to give you an example, I've got my moose layer on top. If I put them down below, whoops, let's undo that. 2-tap undo is still alive and well. There we go. So now I've put this moose underneath all the other drawings and stuff. So you can arrange it like arrange your tracks like you're changing layer order. Tap and hold on a track to bring up the track options. Now keep in mind they do in the manual they say specifically in an area that's not occupied with content, right? So if I tap and hold on this, it's weird. I get track options when tapping and holding on the content, but that same little thing comes up when I tap and hold on an empty area of the track itself. So just be aware of the differences. So when I tap and hold on this, these are all options for the thing itself, but the track options for the whole track are there. Okay. I think I'm understanding that right. Maybe not. If I'm wrong, leave a comment, because it's always good to help out your fellow artists. Okay, so the other thing that I wanted to show you. So now all of the different content types that you can put in a track, they'll generally look the same, except video will have those little, you can see those little film reel sprocket things to make it look like a film reel. That's going to be very specific to video. And when you are trying to look at those track options, that's going to change depending on the type of track that it is, as well as like whether it's a drawing, audio, text, or video. And also if you have several different tracks, different track types selected, like with different types of content in those tracks, pulling up track options is only going to show the options that apply to all of those tracks. So if things aren't looking right, just take a look at what you've got selected, and that's why. So that's one thing that I thought was kind of important to bring up. Okay, so there's this other thing. If we tap and hold on this, it says highlight, and all this is really doing is changing the label of that. So if you have like a specific piece of art or whatever, that's how you can, if you want to color code things and make things a little more visible. Now, if you wanted to that to apply to everything, hey, we know how to do that. So we can go to our selection mode. Let's select all of that. We'll group it, hold down again. Oh, that's right. We got to go back out of that mode. There we go. And now we can actually highlight this whole thing. Can we rename it? We can. Then you can change the blend mode for that group, masking, all of that stuff. We've gone over that. That was in my notes to go over. So different content types that you can use. So as far as image, it supports JPEG, PNG, HEIC, TGA, and Procreate documents. So you can bring your existing Procreate work into it and would therefore preserve all the layers and your blend modes and things like that. And then you can use that command that I had stumbled through, seeing that you can export each layer of the artwork into separate tracks. So just think of that if you've already set up some animation stuff in Procreate. Think of how you would be bringing that over into here. That's just super handy to me. Video formats, AVC and H.264. So I believe the AVC is also like HEVC, that high efficiency video codec that Apple uses. So I think that's just kind of a standard thing. Audio formats, AAC, WAVE, FLAC, AC3, AIFF, CAFF, or CAF sometimes called, M4A, MP1, MP2, MP3. And for text, OTF, which I think is open type, TTF, true type font, and TTC, which I'm not familiar with, but that's okay. Okay, we've got one more little place to look here. But one little tip, the number of video tracks and content tracks that you can have is entirely dependent on the model of iPad that you have. I will leave a link in the comments to where you can look that up. But we can pull up settings for the whole movie. So under properties is where we're going to get our ability to change the frame rate, duration of the whole project, and the dimensions, as well as adding your name and a profile picture. The only options for stage is pertaining just to the onion skin. And under timeline, it's referring only to how it's looping. And again, the changing it so it's not looping only what's visible on screen. You have to go into the Apple Settings app in the Procreate section of that to disable that if you want to. For share, you can export it as a video, images, like an image sequence, just one particular frame. I would assume it's going to get it from where the playhead is. And Procreate Dreams. Now, when you export in the Procreate Dreams format, it's not going to keep the undo history. So the file size will be smaller, and that's the whole point. But just keep that in mind if you are hoping to share that with someone, so they do have your undo history. It won't be in there. What you would want to do instead is to make a duplicate of your current project as is and send them that as well. I have not looked into the advanced one, but it looks like you can just dial in your settings to be a little more specific. If I go into preferences, this is just kind of some real basic stuff. Where do you want the user interface, on the left or right? Brush scaling. This stuff is all pretty similar stuff to what you would see in Procreate. Not going to go over all of that in there. The other thing I didn't really touch base on was in drawing mode, the color. None of that has really changed from Procreate at all. So I'm not even gonna bother going into that. I think that's about it. Covered everything that I've learned so far. I'm gonna go over one more thing here. This at the bottom here, stored in our settings for our movie under preferences, stored undo steps. If you set this to a high number, the file size is going to get really big. In particular, they say if you choose infinite, you're going to have a really big file size. So just be aware. It'll capture everything, all your mistakes and all of the undo history, but you could end up with a really big file. So if you don't mind not having a big undo history and you really want to keep the file size down, you could actually even drop that down to 10. So I thought that's the last little thing that I should cover there. But anyway, that's all we're gonna cover. Think we gave you it was about 50 minutes. Thanks for hanging in with us. Moose and I love you very much for hanging with us in this video, and we will catch you next time. Happy animating with Procreate Dreams. If you made something cool, share a link in the comments. I would love to go check out and see what people are making. Until then, have a good one, and we'll talk to you later.